Welcome back to the C Morning Show, everyone. In this segment, we're going to talk a little bit of U.S. politics, and it is a high possibility that United States President Joe Biden and his predecessor, Donald Trump, may be set for an election rematch in November after clinching their respective parties' nominations. The indication of a repeat of the Trump-Biden rivalry is quite evident after Trump's victory over his closest rival in the Republican Party, Nikki Haley. The national polls show Joe Biden and Donald Trump are separated by the finest of margins as they are locked in a bitter campaign. The early victories for Trump in two initial elections were quite surprising, given that he is facing dozens of charges for his past actions. The superiority of Trump over Haley is read by Joe Biden's campaign team as a takeover of the Republican Party by the hardline or right-wing groups in the United States. Donald Trump's campaign is quietly confident. The Electoral College system means the White House will ultimately turn on a few thousand voters in a handful of states and Trump the polling advantage there. Meanwhile, Biden's presidency has been defined by high inflation, big industrial policy bills, and turmoil abroad in Afghanistan, Ukraine, and the Middle East. In fact, the election will be less of a popularity contest than a referendum, on which many Americans think is the least bad option. And we will have a deep dive now into the possible rematch between Biden and Trump, as we're now going to connect with Habib Abiyan Dzakwan from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Indonesia. Good morning, Mas Abi. Good to see you again. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Mas Abi, so the U.S. election is likely to see Biden and Trump going head-to-head once again. But what are your thoughts in regards to how likely this is going to happen?
Well, it was highly anticipated by many analysts, not only in Indonesia, but also, in the States. But the problem is, I think we are too early to tell which one will likely win the election, given like so many unpredictabilities, uncertainties happening not only inside of the country, but also like outside of the country. You mentioned earlier about the conflict in the Middle East and also to some extent in the Ukraine. So these international issues also likely shape the way Americans think about their presidential candidates, because one way or another, it drives the price inside of the country. So yes, the fact that we are going to see the rematch, and it was highly anticipated by many like analysts, but again, it's still too early to tell which one will win the election.
Absolutely. And okay, let's talk more about these quote-unquote negative aspects from each side. We mentioned that the dynamics for both sides are quite intense. Trump being shadowed by 91 different criminal charges, Biden with his controversial policies, including what you mentioned, the Middle East as well. How do you think this is going to impact their head-to-head battle? Which ones do you think Americans will likely deem more important or will likely focus on when it comes to casting their vote?
As far as we talk to American colleagues, unfortunately, like they do not have, any other option other than through existing candidates. But when we see, like for example, the former President Trump, right, despite of all the charges, I think like he's still the most popular candidate compared to other contenders. Like previously, there was like Nikki Haley. She was the last, contender in the primary. But again, even like Nikki Haley cannot win the election back home. I mean, like the primary back in her home state. But on the other hand, we also have Biden, right? Biden also is the most popular, and I think other contenders from Democratic Party, unfortunately, like do not want to meddle or like to jeopardize the chance for Biden to win. As such, they somehow show self-restraint. And also like exercise full support not only to Biden but also Kamala Harris. But I think that in terms of this current election, one determining factor it will be about the VP picks. whether like Trump will likely choose a better candidate, a slightly better candidate compared to like Democrats or not. So we are also going to anticipate about the VP determining the outcome of the election itself.
Okay, now pigging back off of that, since October the 7th, Biden's outward support for the Middle East conflict has kind of seen many of his supporters withdrawing their support for him. So is this a right time for momentum for Donald Trump to kind of gain more votes?
It could be, but like the current Palestinian and also Israeli crisis somehow is unprecedented, right? Yes, in the past, that any presidential candidate like can just like ignore or overlook like the issue, but nowadays, because the unprecedented level of the destruction and also like the catastrophic image that we have been seeing over the past few months, it draws attention right from all supporters, from the Democratic Party, especially like from the Biden's initial supporters who initially thought that Biden could, be more moderate in terms of making peace and also like pushing Israeli like to the negotiation table. But unfortunately, like Biden doesn't show like pretty reliable evidence that he can pressure Israel on this issue because, we have been seeing so far that the Israeli president ignored like the call by Biden like to stop, the war, waging war, and also like waging operation in Gaza. But we have seen now like Biden receive like a lot of criticism, especially like from young voters, especially also like from several key battlegrounds, including in Michigan, in which Muslim population are also massive and also determining factor for winning the election. So we see more and more, criticism towards Biden's Middle East policy. But again, it doesn't necessarily, juxtapose or turn into like an easy win for Trump. Trump also has to prove that he is a rational leader to democratic, constituents. Otherwise, like, it won't change anything.
All right, that's a very good point. And in addition, though, after several vetoes, we have now seen that the U.S. have abstained at the last UN vote for the ceasefire. How is this? Is this going to help change public opinion on Joe Biden, or is it too little too late, in your opinion?
I think like it is helpful in a sense of moderating, the sentiment towards Biden. So many criticism towards Biden because Biden, doesn't do anything much, especially on restricting war equipment export to Israel. But I think Biden tries to do as maximum as possible, as much as possible, including like showing like the abstention like in the United Nations Security Council, and to some extent also openly criticizing Israel, and plan to deliver more humanitarian aid, either like by building temporary port in Palestine, also the airdrop of this humanitarian assistance. So Biden, I think, like is fragile in fragile position with regards to the issue, but he is good in a sense of playing all the cards, right? Using like the humanitarian assistance is the easiest way to win back the public support, and also like showing the abstention, although it probably damages its his base among like the Israeli and also the establishment in America. But I think like this is the easiest way and the most rational way to do so.
Right. Now, let's actually swing back over to Trump for a minute. We do know that his support has been always quite unpopular in urban areas, and it seems to remain so. Why do you think the reasons are behind this?
Sometimes like people are living in the urban areas are the most educated one, right? So I think like Trump still cannot win, or at least like hasn't been able to convince the educated population of the states. Trump sometimes uses a narrative, like a radical narrative about the country, and I think like urban population doesn't necessarily like buy in the narrative that offered by Trump. But nowadays we see like everything is becoming more expensive in the United States. Probably like there will be a slight change, in terms of the urban population. But again, I think the education factor is important factor here.
Okay, now let's shift gears a little bit and put China into the mix in all of this. Now, we do know that they're very well aware of America's position when it comes to the conflict in the Middle East. But regardless of who emerges victorious in the U.S. presidential election, what do you think China's position is on this?
Right. Let me begin by saying that for U.S., despite all the parties, China is a bipartisan issue. So you are right when mentioning that regardless of whoever wins the election, the U.S. stance over China definitely will be still a bit hostile, I would say. But in terms of from China, I think like China also anticipates, the two possibilities, whether like it is Trump or it is Biden. But definitely, yes, China probably sees, anyone who wins the U.S. election could be jeopardizing, the rise of China's economy as we have seen now. For example, yes, Biden probably is different compared to Trump in terms of believing and trusting international institutions. But I think under Biden era, so many like policies now really hurting China's rise in terms of technology. Back in October 8, 2021, in which like Biden imposed export control over like technology, high advanced, technology materials like semiconductor, among others. So I think it is hurting like China's economy. But Trump is not a better option for China also because, Trump over the past few months, we have seen like during his campaign, he already promised to impose higher tariff like to any Chinese products. And I think Indonesia also has to anticipate the implications from the U.S. tariff to China because we have been providing inputs to Chinese products and also like they're doing the other way around. So it is not a good time for China for sure these days. I think geopolitics will likely remain in place until like in the upcoming decade.
Yeah, and we also have to remember and throw COVID into the mix during Biden's administration as well. That certainly did not help relations, especially economics-wise, between China and the United States. But if you were China and you had to make a choice between the quote-unquote, in their eyes, lesser of the two evils, would you likely pick Trump because of his past actions while he was in office?
Yeah, I think that for China, Trump seems an appealing choice because Trump doesn't believe in international institutions, including the NATO, right? So back then, he always threatened to pull out like from NATO, and as such, it also somehow scares like U.S. allies and partners in European and also like the East Asia, like Japan and also like South Korea, because under Trump's leadership, the reassurance of U.S. presence and also like security umbrella is somehow is abstained, it's absent, right? No such thing as we will protect you whenever for example any crisis happens. There isn't such thing as that under Trump's presidency. As such, China sees that as an appealing as an appealing reason. But at the same time, we also see, as I mentioned earlier, tariff like to Chinese products are getting massive. Promised by like the Trump candidate, but again, China's economy is now a bit sinking. So they are also considering and paying attention more and more to economic factor. So yeah, probably in short, China is still likely perceived like Trump, probably a slightly better option.
Right, that makes sense to me too. Now let's look inwards now and take a look at how significant do you think is the outcome of the U.S. election for us here in Indonesia, as well as our neighbors in the region of Southeast Asia?
We saw like the Trump presidency from 2017 until like 2021, right? Trump didn't attend like ASEAN-led meetings, including like the East Asian Summit. So the commitment back then was questioned. And not so sure that the commitment will be different this time because Trump is Trump, and no one can predict what kind of policies that he will show or he will take. But at least Trump back then also initiated some a bit like a peaceful negotiation with North Korea, and also no major war like under his presidency, like either in Russia or either in like for example in the Middle East. There wasn't any like major conflict or open conflict, right? Because anyone like who wants to create conflict, they will likely see and perceive like whether like the counterpart like from the America, like that's especially like in this case Trump, will can somehow like have a more rational policies. So they are a bit doing self-restraint at home. So as such, I think during Trump presidency, no major changes except like an international institutions in which Trump withdraw like from so many like the climate change especially issue like that doesn't attract Trump's attention. But again, in Indo-Pacific or like Southeast Asia, what we really anticipate is the declining a commitment from the US to provide a secure and also like balancing role like in the region. But we also see, but the other the other side of the argument, we also see the system is continuing, right? Even under Trump presidency, we see we saw back then the Garuda Shield. They usually, touted or sell to the public that this is a flagship military cooperation between or security cooperation between Indonesia and the United States. Was still continuing under Trump presidency. So yes, the commitment probably undermines or disappears, but it doesn't eliminate everything like on the table.
Okay, so I want to go on that last bit here and shift to our final thoughts in regards to what you just mentioned. The United States, we do know, play a significant role in regional security here in Southeast Asia. In fact, cooperation between the U.S. and Indonesia on defense and security issues, which includes military training and equipment, can also be influenced by the policies and priorities of the U.S. administration, whichever one is in place. So what are your thoughts on this?
So yeah, last year, 2023, Indonesia and the United States just elevated our diplomatic relations like to comprehensive strategic partnership, in which one of the substance is about upgrading our defense cooperation with the United States. So in terms of this kind of defense cooperation arrangement, I think will remain continue regardless whoever wins the election. Probably like Biden can expedite and also like can provide more programs, but regardless of that, Trump will under Trump's presidency, probably in the future we can still see like because of the program has already been installed, right? Has been touted to the public, sold to the public, and so as such, I think all officials, administration officials, will continue the existing path. What we have seen, I think like previously, will continue. But I think on the other element, we see probably a stronger regionalism among Southeast Asian countries, because now we do not have a counterbalancing a partner in the region. So we need to strengthen more and more regional cooperation among ourselves. To stand up against any like controversial or challenging issues like for the region. Yes, defense cooperation, like especially maritime security. We see recently inaugurated Coast Guard Training Center in Batam, among others. Maritime security is, and also like cyber security. Yes. So security and defense cooperation will remain continued, but it is not at the highest level attention.
All right, so we look very much forward to what should be an exciting race, should it be a rematch between Biden and Trump. Always love getting your insights, Mas Abi. We will hopefully have more dialogues getting closer to Election Day. Thank you for joining us. Have yourself a great day.
Thank you, you too.
All right, so that was the researcher from the Center of Strategic and International Studies for Indonesia, or CSIS, and that concludes our dialogue for this segment. We are going to go for a short break. In the meantime, though, you can stay updated with us for all the latest news on our social media platforms as well, via Instagram, X, and YouTube at CToday News. We'll be right back.